the deal.
Here's the deal.
We're joined at the Boston Public Library by a really accomplished pianist at the Boston Symphony. Here it is. I'll tell you, whoever that is really good. It's Mozart's Environmental. What'd you say? Oh, it's the mayor of Boston.
The mayor of Boston.
Playing at
That's
the
right.
BSO in the concert for the city.
You know,
Mayor Wu, it's a pleasure to have you.
It's
Congratulations.
nice to see you. I mean, that was just, I could do anything else in the world, and my parents, this is the one thing.
That's right.
Proud.
Yeah, that's right. Forget being mayor. The BSO, playing with the BSO. But I got to tell you, that was very depressing to the rest of us, because I'm thinking to myself, okay, she's the mayor. That's a little time-consuming. She's got 2 little kids. That's a little time-consuming. And here she is performing with the BSO. I mean, you know,
What an incredible...
You've ruined the bar. You know what I mean? You raised
what an
the bar.
incredible experience. I mean, just being... I will never forget that moment of being on the stage. The sound of this premier world-class orchestra, and the fact that they were not only stooping down to allow an amateur to play with them, but opening up at that concert. That is their free concert, where the whole program was Boston connected, or there was a Lowell and a Chelsea, but area connected composers or artists and collaborators showcasing the history of the organization. Young people were throughout the halls throughout the rooms of Symphony Hall beforehand, performing, and it's just, we're so lucky and blessed in Boston to have such institutions really deeply embedded in the fabric of our community.
Were you terrified? Were you terrified?
Oh, I was terrified. I mean, terrified like nothing else.
So one more question.
My hands were clammy.
Did you pick the second movement of the Mozart
No,
Overture, or did they?
They did.
They did. It was a great choice.
I had not actually played a lot of Mozart before, so they suggested that. They suggested the slow movement, thankfully, of that.
You didn't have to worry about crashing your scales for days before. Yeah.
And it's beautiful. I had never played it before, but it's, you know, you've heard the theme in different
places
and movies.
That
and
tearjerker movie, Environmental, and that is a real tearjerker.
You know, staying on the arts for a second, I can't remember who it was, whether it was Keith Lockhart, Andres Nelson, whoever it was, talked about your commitment to the arts, and I think is one pretty important piece of proof. Tell us briefly about this affordable rehearsal space that's being made to a bunch of artists.
Yeah, we're really excited about the chance to, in some ways, start pushing back against the wave of incredibly stressful displacements of our artist community. When we see, you know, the stresses that we see in the housing market, we feel in our small business community, we feel in artist studio and space, and so there have been some pockets now where, thanks to some good luck and the sheer tenacity of artists, different pockets of communities have been able to organize. The Humphrey Street Studios, for example, in Upham's Corner, a group of artists worked with the city and actually were able to purchase their own building instead of getting pushed out. We have some examples in Fort Point where Midway Studios, the same thing had happened. But this one is part of an official city development approval process where the redevelopment in Alston Brighton will actually create a whole new building that is dedicated for studio space. And it will take a little bit of time to renovate. We found temporary space for the transition, but this just is reflecting a new approach that we have, that arts has to be firmly a part of how we do development.
That's Mayor Wu. Should be with us for the next hour. By the way, if you're at the library, Hannah, do you want to raise your hand over there, or a coworker? If you go to Hannah and you have a question for the mayor, depending on whatever it is, you may very well get to ask her directly. You know, can we go from something incredibly exhilarating to something wildly depressing? There was a story this morning on BUR about a report coming out of your Boston Public Health Commission, which sort of paralleled one of the major themes in Ayanna Pressley's first campaign for Congress, where she'd say there's no greater age disparity in America within a congressional district. When you get on a bus in one part of my district, and then you get off a bus in another thing. Could you fill in the blanks on this horrifying analysis about Back Bay versus Nubian Square?
Yeah, we see life expectancy, again, averages, but life expectancy experience a gap of multiple decades, and that same historic disinvestment that led us to this point in terms of redlining and gaps in home ownership and wealth building, or the presence of or lack of tree canopy, and therefore the temperature difference in a neighborhood that has much more pavement rather than more green space and trees. This is the fabric that was built up through policy decisions over many, many decades. And the pandemic not only revealed to many, not those who've been living it, but to the world, but also deepened and exacerbated so many of the gaps and challenges. And so we're really galvanized to take up the urgency in this moment. Everything that we're doing on the housing side, on public health and education, jobs, safety, it is all interconnected and really trying to focus our efforts so that we can close gaps where they have been built up over a long time.
92 years in the Back Bay and 69 years in Nubian Square. I mean,
It's wrong and it's unacceptable.
It's unconscionable. I mean, it's just...
Mayor, when you were on your way in, we were talking about this case of the Boston police officers, 3 former members and 1 current officer in the Boston Police Department were recently acquitted of this overtime fraud charges. And the defense was basically, as the Globe put it, everybody does it, so it's okay. A lawyer for one of the officers said that in practice, cheating on overtime, he didn't call it cheating on overtime, but what was done was cheating on overtime. He called it a time-honored tradition that officers could, would, and did submit in 4-hour conspiracies. Another attorney called it the culture there, which I think is probably true because we've heard about this kind of thing for quite some time. This isn't the first time it's happened. You said you have to really look into, control this abuse and misuse. But it is the culture, and it's hard to change that culture.
We are still in I feel like every time I come, it's a little bit of a report on contract negotiations as well. And as mentioned previously, overtime and how we are treating overtime and the buckets available and how those are managed, that is very much defined by the provisions in the contract in a lot of ways. And so that is a central part of our negotiations. But it also has to be lived out every day in the management and therefore culture that is set across the agency. So it's not enough just to change rules or not enough just to think about a culture while there are still loopholes that exist on the contract side. You have to do both. And that is what I know Commissioner Cox has been putting in place the steps to do and build out his leadership team to make happen.
You said to Marjorie several months ago about the contract, I don't know if you used these words, but you basically said this arbitration and restoration of police officers who've been found to have committed fireable offenses is a red line item for you. There'll be no deal without some reform there. Do you feel the same way about this overtime thing?
Yes.
You do?
Yep. On discipline, on overtime especially, and I want to be clear, this is not about trying to punish or make examples of particular individuals or trying to remove the ability for someone to access what they thought was a part of the job, even if it was by culture. It has a real impact on the operations of the department when individuals are able to, and now a significant portion, when we first started really doing the measuring, it was up to 10% of the patrol force was out for a year plus on medical leave. And everyone is legally required and deserves their support for when there are medical situations that come up. But we need to have some protocols in place, some mechanisms to decide if it is still appropriate for someone to remain on the job. Because when they do stay out indefinitely in some cases, the burden gets put on other officers to then need to stretch and do overtime, and then it ripples throughout. And so this is about having the staffing that's available to do the work that we need to be done to support the health and well-being of those officers who are on the job. And that's really what, at the core, all of these issues are about. 1 or
2 more quick police things, and then we promise we'll get to the calls at 877-301-8970. Do you have any update on this status of this Captain Danilecki situation? A guy who's been accused on multiple occasions of excessive force. Something is pending. I think a decision ultimately by the commissioner has been pending forever. In fairness to Commissioner Cox, he's relatively new to the job. Any update on that or no?
I do not have an update today.
Okay, and also last thing, some budget cuts in the police budget are being proposed by members of the council. Are they ones you could support?
I have not seen the proposals yet. I think we're just starting the hearing process for the budget at this moment. We will get the official proposed amendments back sometime in June, I believe.
Let's go to the calls. Grady, you're in Charlestown. You're on with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu.
Hello,
Hi there, Grady.
Thank you very much, sir. Hello, Madam Mayor.
Hello.
I'm calling it with the question about capital expenditures versus maintenance costs. For example, in Charlestown, there was a beautiful little bronze fountain installed in Thompson Square a number of years ago. And a number of years ago, it stopped working. Contact the city. Could you repair it? The response is, oh, it's got to go into the budget, as if it's a capital item, in my opinion. But in the meantime, no one is maintaining it. Same thing applies to the many broken sidewalks in Boston, some of which, if you go out your back door, you see at the beginning of Quincy Market.
Grady, what's your question, if you can? What do you want to ask the mayor?
My question is, how can we get sidewalks repaired without hearing that it's going to be a year, 2, 3, 4 wait?
Grady, thank you. We appreciate your call.
Okay, got it. And I'm curious now about this little bronze fountain as well. I'm going to look into that in Thompson Square additionally. I think, it can obviously you need both components of it. We have the facilities, whether that is a building or a structure like a fountain, and then the personnel needed to actually staff the fixing or maintaining of these items. And then I guess another bucket is the funding overall, so that any changes that needed, new parts or other pieces can actually happen. We are really focused on trying to get down into the nuts and bolts of having clear maintenance plans for all of our public assets in the city. That has not been the case, and previously, in case you're interested, the way that it had been structured was each department would have a little pool, a very, very small bucket of money, basically, that they could be used for any repairs that were needed, and they really had to prioritize the most urgent of challenges. That meant that many things that were less urgent would get worse, and until they could get into that point where they were at the top of the list, but by that point it cost even more to repair it than it would have been if we had just put in the maintenance money to begin with. And so we really want to take on a much more professional real estate portfolio management philosophy, where every single asset that exists, whether it's a pool or a community center or a park with a fountain, has dedicated funding going to the maintenance on a regular basis for that specific structure, so that it's not all pooled and then creating strange and in fact more expensive incentives for the city overall. In terms of sidewalks, I've learned a lot about sidewalks. Depending on where you are, I just took a walk down Temple Street with leaders from the Independent Living Center, and I'm blanking on the full name, Disability Independent Living Center downtown. And what we saw was a patchwork where the city had a portion of the sidewalk, then some private owners have what are called area ways. There's actually a space below the sidewalk, given how old the buildings were and how the streets were constructed on top of them. So we actually don't have the legal authority to go in and fix that, because it might cause collapse or something to their structure underneath, so we have to get them to sign up. Anyway, we are in the middle of a revamp to really understand how we can have better leverage and control over all the sidewalks in the public way, because it is quite complicated in certain very historic locations. And so I suspect that Charlestown might have some issues, but if we can follow up with you and understand where exactly your sidewalks are a challenge, I'll try to get a better answer on the timeline.
Hey, Grady, you hung up. If you text us at 877-301-8970 with your contact information, we'll pass it along to the mayor.
Mayor Wu, the Title 42, that border control policy that was begun by the Trump administration, continued by President Biden, expired, I think it was midnight last night. Scenes from the border. There are tens of thousands of people trying to get into the country. But there's an impact here in Boston. One of your people in your administration talked about all these people coming into the emergency rooms at Boston Medical Center. A texter was concerned about people coming into Chelsea. So what's happening?
Yeah, we really have been experiencing, as every city across the country, a crisis when it comes to migrant families who are a little bit stuck in limbo. Every person, every human being has the legal right to come to the United States and seek asylum or shelter, and those policies have been in place for a long time. But when the review of that individual's particular situation and the then decision to allow the pathway to stay and or work authorization that comes along with that, when that process is so drawn out, people are stuck. They are looking to work, looking to contribute, looking to be in a safe democracy where they can raise their families. And we at the city level are now dealing with many of the impacts of the processes having people fall through the cracks at the federal level. So we're working very closely with the state. This is affecting municipalities across the Commonwealth to be able to triage the situation, create temporary housing so that families can get settled, and then into more of the official channels for access to health care or services, to be able to legal support to as accelerate a work authorization as possible.
Explain that, why they can't work.
So without official documentation that, there are many pathways to being able to work in this country, of course, citizenship and having your social security number and documentation as a United States citizen, having legal status through a different employment immigration pathway, or even if you are sometimes in the process of getting your case to be heard, there are mechanisms for work authorization to be given as well. But each one of those requires human beings at the federal level to go through documents for many, many, many people. And it is now in the timeline I'm hearing it can be up to a year to hear back if you are able to work or not. And in the meantime, everyone has to find a way to support their family. And we're hearing from our partners on the ground that those families who have been able to get that authorization, it is amazing. They're filling important staffing shortages that the city and our society has. Their families are adjusting really well, and everyone is just so hungry to be part of community here. But without that official pathway, it makes it very difficult. And we are, again, collaborating very closely with the state, but this is an issue that will continue, it sounds like, only to ramp up.
We're talking to celebrated pianist and also mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Mono, you're on from Charlestown. Hello there, Mono.
A very good afternoon, Marjorie, Jim, Mayor Wu.
Hello.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for taking my call. My name is Mano, and my daughter, now a sixth grader, has been a BPS since kindergarten. She's a straight-A student, hard worker. But despite that, last Friday at 4:45 p.m., she was told that she wasn't good enough for her first choice of exam school, which was BLS. An hour later, she found out that a neighborhood friend was invited to BLS, even though that friend has lower grades and test scores than her. Now, obviously, as you can imagine, she naturally came to me, asked why, and blamed me for it. Well, that's like every other 12-year-old would. Now, I can talk to her about equity. I can talk to her about how unfair the system used to be. But this friend is the same race as my daughter, and her family in the same economic situation as us. So we really appreciate it, Mayor Wood, if you help me answer that why. But know that BPS did respond to us after several calls and emails to tell us that despite all the embarrassing mistakes that they've made, the policy was applied properly to my daughter. And also please respect the fact that she's a child and do not call her an unintended consequence like one of your school committee members did a few weeks ago.
Wow.
Mono, thanks.
Mano, I'm so sorry, and I have a little bit of a sense of how stressful this particular point in life and thinking about your child's education is, with some experiences in my own family. And I know that for a parent, there's nothing more devastating than feeling like you disappointed your child in some way. I want your daughter to understand that we are dedicated to making sure that opportunities at every school are great and supportive. And at this moment, it may feel like, a lot of people are saying there's only one school or one pathway or this or that. That's the right way. I'm happy to try to make sure there's some more conversations that happen in particular around your specific situation, so we can understand what exactly your daughter was given the opportunity for, or what happened there, and help you understand what the offerings are. I will say I feel the urgency because this will not be in place for your daughter for this year and the transition to 7th grade. We're working as quickly as we can because it is just, we are never going to be a district that serves every family, and that can be the draw to be the best place to raise a family, unless our school system feels like it's not a lottery for a winning ticket only if you can get into a very narrow set of schools. Every single option, especially for our high schools, needs to be something that we are proud of, and this has been the big focus. We're kind of working to expand early education and care, thinking about curriculum across the board, and particularly special education or English language learners. But then on the high schools, this is where many of the disparities end up playing out. And so there needs to be, I mean, you live, it sounds like very close to Charlestown High School, right? You have a building and a community in your neighborhood that we need to make sure has every resource so that you would feel every bit as excited to have a different opportunity. We're not there yet for many of our schools because of the state of the buildings, because of historic disinvestment. And Charlestown High School is one of the places that I have my eye on because we need geographically to have these options for predictable pathways to great options in every part of the city. So happy to make sure that someone really walks through the specific situation and what the choice is before your family and for your daughter. And I'm sorry that it is taking some time, but please make sure that she knows that I hear her experience, and this is a priority to make sure that we are correcting this so that there are many, many options that people feel excited about in the future.
So Mano should stay on the line and Mano, if you stay on, one of my coworkers will get your contact information and share it with the mayor. Thank you for
Mayor,
your call.
we heard the upset in Mano's voice trying to explain this to his daughter. Yeah. Just a few weeks ago, the Globe reported on how they sent out the wrong acceptances to Boston Latin School.
It wasn't acceptances, but
what was it? Explain that story.
So, and first, okay, so the big picture is that for a very long time, Boston has been a district where, for many, many families, I have heard, and again, I've raised my youngest sister through middle school and high school here. We heard the same things, that it was, you can get into this one school or these 3 schools, and if not, you have to find a way to pay for education or something like that. We have 25 high schools in Boston. We are putting the resources across the city, and they all need to be those excellent options. And we are, so that there's no way to get to an equitable or fair system by adjusting this or that bit in the lottery or the admissions process, as long as we have too few seats that are considered really excellent and desirable relative to the number of high school students that we have. So that's the big picture. What happened with exam schools a couple weeks ago was there are multiple stages in the process. Students have to take a test and have their grades averaged for acceptance into the exam schools. They're analyzed based on geographic tiers that are roughly correlated with socioeconomic data, and then according to those tiers to ensure geographic and socioeconomic equity in representation across each of our exam schools. That's how the invitations go out.
Okay. This
year, the phasing back in of testing requirements and grades and all of that meant that the calculations were averaged in it's too technical to get it all the way into there. They should have been averaged grade by grade and by subject rather than all together. It was a different averaging mechanism that was slightly different from what was publicly stated as the policy. They caught that at the point where students had been asked, after they were, all of their data was analyzed, they get asked to rank their top choices in the exam schools, 1, 2, 3, out of which one. And some of them were invited to rank schools who should not, a very small number, I think it was about 24 students, and then some were actually not invited to apply even though they did qualify according to the slightly different averaging mechanism. So those students and families were all informed before any enrollment decisions were made or taken into account. But still, again, this is such a fraught and emotionally charged experience for families. To have any sense of instability, even if it wasn't that you officially had anything set, it's still something that shouldn't have happened, and we've corrected this for the future.
We're talking to Mayor Wu. She'll be with us at the bottom of the next hour. Before we take a break, Mayor Wu, I think it's fair to say you're a good government type. And I'm sure you read the story in the Globe this morning about the former superintendent-in-chief of the Boston Police and former brother-in-law, the Secretary of Transportation, getting a nearly $1 million no-bid, I repeat, no-bid contract to do some work for the MBTA. What's your reaction when you read about those kinds of things?
I mean, it's hard to, I think sometimes we say the T needs to be fixed immediately, everything's a crisis, but then we also want to make sure that all of the, that the mechanisms for emergency, urgency are only used in certain situations, in a new administration. I don't know if they had all the protocols in place, and I haven't really gotten a direct conversation to have any inside information or insight. I do know that what it feels like this situation reflects is that we have not had a clear plan for the T. We have not had any sense of prioritization, including with public conversation around whether some kind of strategy for personnel should have been ranking in the top of what the emergency was, or whether it was solely about infrastructure or hiring this or that person. I know that the program that they're looking to implement around CompStat, we use in the police department in Boston. It's a very effective program. The now secretary, former city official, knows that well as well and knows the benefits of it. But we had to be focused on earning trust at a time when the T is needing a lot of emergency lifelines, including for people to even believe that this is a system where we can see progress.
I don't want to dwell on this, but doesn't it feed the exact opposite notion that it's not what you know, it's who you know? I mean, the average person gets up, what they'll hear about this is Bill Bratton may be a very competent person. He got a no-bid contract from his former sister-in-law. It's troubling, right?
Yeah, I mean, public officials are subject to everyone in public service should be subject to the highest standards when it comes to making sure we're following all the right procedures. I don't know in this case if something was officially tripped up legally or not.
Talking to Mayor Wu.
Well, Bill Bratton said he did very well in all his multiple divorces. I think he's on his
He
fourth
did say
wife
that,
now.
actually,
So he
in the
said
Globe story.
kept
Hell
good
of a
relations
line.
with the families of his ex-wives. So good for him in that regard, I guess. We're talking to Mayor Wu. She's with us until the top of the hour. No, the bottom of the hour.
Too.
At the Boston Public Library. You can call her or text her. We'll try to get to as many calls and texts as we can. 877-301-8970. You can watch her on youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
A new documentary looks at actor Michael J. Fox's life and career, which changed dramatically after he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's challenging. Yes, it even makes you sad sometimes, and sometimes it makes you angry. But it's my life.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. Michael J. Fox tells his story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Hebrew Senior Life, a Harvard Medical School affiliate empowering seniors to reach their full potential through senior living, healthcare, aging research, and more. You can consider Hebrew Senior Life at allweareforyou.org. And South County, Rhode Island, featuring 100 miles of coastline and 20 public beaches. South County visitors can find many ways to enjoy the water in the Ocean State. Learn more at southcountyri.com.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Regan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. The mayor of the city of Boston will be here for another half hour for her monthly Ask the Mayor. Lynn, watching on YouTube, posts no cupcakes, no buns, no cookies, nothing. They will not invite Mayor Wu back. Well, there's some truth in that. Where are the
I do
cookies?
have my show and tell.
What do you have?
That's
it's
right.
green today, so
What is it?
I don't think they're edible, but who knows? So the show and tell for today is two plant. Okay, let me back up. Today we announced a Boston Tree Alliance. 60% of Boston's tree canopy is actually on private property compared to street trees or our parks. So we at the city side, we have a new forestry division. We're hard at work. We've built out the capacity to support all the street trees and park trees. But a lot of what we hear from homeowners or residents who have trees in their yards is sometimes trees get cut down because they're starting to buckle up against the foundation, or they're dropping things over to the neighbor's yard. They're a nuisance, when in fact what is needed is just some support with pruning or maintenance. And so the Tree Alliance will focus on private property and helping, led by Mass Audubon, funded by the city, to provide the support for anyone who needs to maintain the trees and or grow and plant them on their own property. As part of that announcement, we celebrated the planting of a microforest at the Boston Nature Center. And so these are two of the native species that are part of that microforest. One for each of you. One is a sweet everlasting, which has white flowers coming out. And then this one is Tiarella cordifolia. So it's textured maple leaf ground cover. So this is something that you would find in the woods in Massachusetts. So.
I love ground cover.
Very kind.
I do. I'm very into ground cover. It makes it your little.
Thank you, Mayor Wu.
If you have
Very
mulch
kind.
instead of grass, you can put that down there. Thank you very much. I'm an aspiring gardener.
Do we have a question?
Yes, we do. We have Anita. She's at the Boston Public Library. A microphone. You're
Hi,
on.
Anita.
Thank you very much, Anita, for coming on, asking a question
Thank
to
you
Mayor
for having
Wu.
me. Hi, Mayor Wu.
Hello.
I have a question regarding bike lanes in Boston. I heard recently that there was some safety issues with the planning or the implementation of them. Is there an update on how things are going?
Are you thinking about a particular spot in the city or just overall?
Overall, I heard that there was, and it might have been on your show, I'm not sure, but that there might be some safety issues with them and what they might be, and if there's any ongoing thoughts about the design of them.
I see. We are a city where we're adding population, we are growing, and if that growth of people and new housing only comes with people being able to get around in cars, we are going to be in big trouble. Our traffic patterns are already starting to creep back up to where they were pre-pandemic, which was Boston being the most congested city at rush hour anywhere in the country. And so we need to create opportunities for people who are interested and want them to take other means of transportation, public transit and the T, as we've talked about, bikes, walking, and to think about neighborhoods that people don't have to only go to one place in the city to access something that you need, that there's really that availability and accessibility across all parts of the city. Bike lanes are really important in that way. And so as we build out streets, we want to take a complete streets approach to them so that we're protecting all road users. And I know sometimes I hear, is it safe if there's a bike lane for pedestrians who are trying to cross the street, or we've had a lot of conversations lately between our Commission for Persons with Disabilities and the Streets Department, who are making bike changes because we want to make sure that the bike lanes aren't taking over a loading zone for someone who might need to access a parking spot that is reserved for someone with disabilities. And if the lane is there, then they can't actually, in a wheelchair, come out of the vehicle that they've arrived in. And so we're working on all the little details. Bike lanes are a mechanism that we very much need in the city to expand transportation, and we want to do it in a way that fits with every other need that we have.
Anita, thank you very much. Let's go to JP. Susan, you're on with the mayor. Hey.
Hi. Hi, Mayor.
Hello.
And Jim and Marjorie.
Hi.
I want to say, first of all, that I'm really happy about the tree policy, but that's not what I called about. I have a seemingly trivial Boston Public Schools issue. So I've had kids, I just went through a quick list. I think I've been in 13 different schools. I've had kids in BPS for a long, long time. And the little things can drive you mad.
Yeah.
So my youngest child is graduating in June and going on to college, and a success story. And the graduation is going to be at White Stadium, which seats 10,000 people. And no one can tell us how many tickets we have, but the rumors are somewhere between 6 and 10.
Okay.
This is stupid. We have people coming in from out of town. We can't even tell them if they can go in the graduation.
How many tickets are you trying to get, Susan?
25.
25. Oh, Susan, you don't fool around.
You asked.
I was just curious.
I mean, I don't want them just for me. I want them for other people, too. It's ridiculous that we can't, have either some good number, like 25, or open the doors. And they don't open the doors because of this mostly unreasonable fear of what it means to get a bunch of BPS parents and students in the same space.
Susan, you're my kind of caller. You made your case.
Hey, Susan.
Is she getting the 25 tickets or what?
So I want to say something about White Stadium because this is a good connection.
Is it Franklin Park? Is that, that's what I thought.
It's in Franklin Park. It's a treasure for the city.
And it's going to be renovated, and it doesn't really have 25,000 usable seats. I mean,
okay, Susan, let's hear from the mayor.
Yeah, the capacity is 10,000, but because of a fire at this point many decades ago, one entire half of the grandstands is unusable. It's structurally deficient and has been for a long, long time. So the max capacity is 5,000 on the other side, and that will have to include students, faculty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, those numbers can go quickly. We've been using White Stadium, Fenway sometimes when they're available has been great for graduations because they have some more room as well. I will look into this particular situation because you called and see what we can do, but we do need to renovate White Stadium as one of the signature gathering spaces in the city. Our hope is that with the RFP that's already out now, we could partner. There's some really exciting potential partners. We've been talking about what it would mean for Boston Public Schools and youth sports to bring a professional women's soccer team back to Boston. They disbanded a number of years ago, and this is such a growing area of interest in terms of soccer in our city and young people, but also women's soccer especially is just taking off internationally. And so the chance to renovate the stadium, to fix all the grandstands, to rebuild the training facilities and locker rooms, to put a real professional track in, an 8-lane track so we can host events there. There's lots of opportunities to make that space one that will not only host graduations with enough seats and tickets for everyone, but bring a lot of opportunity for our students to learn.
Susan, don't go away.
Susan, I want to tell you something. In hoity-toity Brookline, guess how many tickets you get for high school graduations over there? Four.
Because you don't have White Stadium.
That's right.
You know why? Because you don't have Susan as one of the parents. That's what. Susan, stay on hold, and we'll give your contact information to the mayor. Mayor,
I'm sorry. I love at graduations? Have you noticed if you go to graduations lately, I felt like I was a deadbeat parent because I didn't do this. They have these pictures of the kids blown up, like about 10 times the size of the kid.
Great.
And the whole family's waving the pictures of the kids back and forth. I felt like a real loser. And then you have to make sure they get enough clapping, when they walk across the stage. You really have to hoot and holler to make sure your kid is not humiliated by the lack of excitement about their graduation.
Mayor Wu, as in our prior discussions, I've told you not that it matters how appalled I am about this home rule petition thing where a city or town decides it wants to do something that will only affect its residents. And the arrogance of Beacon Hill to say, I'll decide about liquor licenses in Boston. I'll decide about rent control. There's a story in the Globe, I think, by Matt Stout the other day. My takeaway from the story was, speaking of home rule petitions, finally, after a decade or so, this real estate transfer tax, it could be anything, but a transfer tax on more expensive real estate transactions is likely to get support. But the implication was your rent stabilization thing is not. Is that a fair characterization of where you think things are?
I don't know that I've gotten specific. I don't know that anyone could say at this moment whether one or multiple or neither will go through. We have 7 items up at the State House that we are really fighting for around housing, affordability, transit access, childcare, particularly for families experiencing homelessness, climate. And so there are a number of initiatives we're moving through. But I think when it comes to housing, we have to do something. And I do feel that across the board, we are at a bit different place in terms of recognition of the urgency. The numbers around how many people have had to leave Massachusetts really reflect the unaffordability in so many areas.
But one last, have either you or whoever are your liaisons had an opportunity to speak to the Senate President or the Speaker and say, well, whatever the number was the other day, 75% of the people in Boston want some form of rent control. Statewide, 2/3. Has anyone voiced that to the leaders? And if they do, what do they say in return? What's the argument against it?
I have the chance to sit with many of our legislative leaders up at the State House on a regular basis. We talk about a number of issues, and they know very clearly what my priorities are. I'm very probably annoying on that front. They have a different purview and a different perch where they have to think about things and how that affects the entire state. I get the pleasure of just focusing on fighting for Boston, and so I'm going to go hard. I don't have to worry about how this might impact other legislative conversations in other areas.
How does rent stabilization in Boston affect anybody beyond the? I don't mean to be argumentative. It's not you doing it.
That's
what
I would say. But
okay, fine.
I think there are many folks who would, in a legislative body where there are many needs, and Boston tends to be in the news a lot, and we have a lot of conversations about Boston. There are other places that have proposed similar legislation as well, and what would it mean for one to move through but not the other? That's the kind of conversation they have to think about that I have the convenience of just focusing on one city.
The cynical among us would say that perhaps the real estate interests have been very generous to politicians up in Beacon Hill, Jim?
Might say that.
Yeah.
One last home rule.
We have started to hear from folks in real estate. They are similarly recognizing the urgency of housing. Not everyone in all the professional lobbyist groups, but in terms of leaders in real estate, people have said we need to do something so that people can afford to live here as well.
One last home rule thing. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is because of this redistricting thing by federal Judge Saris the other day, throwing it back. I know you're going to come out with a plan, but because deadlines are approaching, correct me if I'm wrong, am I right that the legislature also has to agree to move back certain whatever filing or other dates for us? You're nodding in agreement. I don't even have to finish. Is that right?
There's multiple pathways. So, okay, I'm trying to decide how much time to take on this. It's really thorny, so I'll give an overview of what is at stake here. In order to run for office, someone has to collect signatures from registered voters in the area that they're trying to represent, their particular district. Those signatures have to be vetted and matched against our voter databases, or what's called certified, to make sure that these are real people and they actually live there. And then the ballots, once someone is officially on the ballot because they've been certified to have the signatures, the ballots have to be printed and sent to the printer and then distributed to all the polling locations, prepared for mail-in ballots. So when you back up from Election Day, how many steps are required? There's a lot that needs to go into that. And because the districts are still up in the air right now, people don't know who to even collect signatures from, or whether they will live in the district that they're ultimately trying to represent at this moment. And so we have a tight timeline. Our elections department always makes miracles happen, but we are asking them to do a lot right now. May 30th is the deadline by which we need to know how the maps will go so that we can get the papers in order, so that we can have enough time to certify and have people have enough time to collect signatures. At the same time, we're relaxing some of those requirements. So, for example, we could count signatures from different places. We could require fewer signatures. People will have more time to collect them once the maps are done. But this is predicated on a map being done May 30th. We need to build in time. There are only, I believe, 2 city council meetings on the books between now and May 30th. We will be proposing a map later today, just to make sure that we continue,
the mayor's office.
Continue the administration, moving forward. And we really need some sort of action on this map or another map as soon as this next Wednesday's meeting, in order to have enough time for potential amendments, tweaks, analysis of the Voting Rights Act and all of that. So we're on a quick timeline. We want to do our part to help make sure that we're making that happen. The map that I will be putting forward is really centered around neighborhood identity. I've lived in various parts of the city over time, and when a neighborhood is together within one district, it means that they can have opportunities to advocate and feel fully represented. And so over the course of the many years I've been serving, there are many, many micro neighborhoods in Boston, and we are going to try to put forward a map that will satisfy the court's requirements, satisfy the legal requirements, as well as unite communities and neighborhoods.
So was I wrong about saying the legislature needs to do something?
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that. So to change the process by which signatures will count for someone to be on the ballot, right now we've put forward a home rule petition. The legislature would need to sign off on that. If that becomes impossible, there is a pathway where we could go back to the court and say,
because the legislature didn't do its
we're
thing.
in this with you. You need to do it, but we'd rather go through the democratic process.
So, Mayor Wu, Jen is in Westford, not Boston, but she's nonetheless very excited about open streets, Newbury Street being open, other streets being open. So there's a lot of open streets, and there's also possible dog-friendly spaces and beer gardens and open dining patios. So it's a gorgeous day. Tell us about being outside and eating and drinking.
So everyone says, Boston's not stuffy. Boston's stuffy. Boston's not fun. Boston's not nice. We were rated, according to a survey, of being one of the nicest places, right? And I think if you get past people being silent on the T to each other, in fact, there's so much community here and so much hunger to be in community, to take care of your neighbors, to take care of your park or your block. Open streets help cultivate that sense of building community in a public space. They were packed last year. There's going to be one per month starting in June. So June, July, August, September, October. I'm going to get the exact order wrong, but it's something like Jamaica Plain, Roxbury, Dorchester, I think.
No,
Dorchester.
Olson Brighton is third. I have it in front of me. That's the only reason I know. Then Dorchester, then East Boston. Yeah.
And Newbury Street will be open on the weekends for double the number of the entire summer.
How about, is there a permanent?
That's great.
Is there a permanent? I mean, we talked about the Copley situation, which was fabulous. Is there a permanent closing in the offing that you want to hint to us about?
It takes a lot to think about emergency vehicle access, around this and that pieces. There are some places where I think it could be possible, for example, on the weekends, but less so during the week. If you look, different cities around the country have different technology. They're starting to experiment with, for example, bollards that could be activated to come up and down on their own. So that would open up some more places. But there are spots where we've started to pedestrianize, and they've all been incredible for the businesses, for the residents, and for larger community.
And hold on, just want to tell us about the dogs.
Oh, dogs. So,
yes.
Outdoor patios. You sometimes would see like a water bowl right at the edge of the patio. The dog would be sitting on the other side of the fence on the sidewalk. These are outdoor spaces. We will need to have a process to ensure that full sanitary and food safety requirements are met, but there's now a way for patios to get certified as dog-friendly so that they could be open to dogs with the right allocations and space.
John in Boston, you're on with Mayor Wu. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to ask the mayor and our administration to please look into the police station and how they handle domestic violence incidents. I was helping a domestic violence victim who did not want to file a report in their district, in their local police department. So we took them to a different district. And though the chief was trying to be helpful, ultimately we had to go to her local district to file the report. And, the problem with that is it creates a barrier. And, that person didn't want to go to that one because of fear of, the perpetrator seeing them or maybe tracking them or whatever. And so, if you live in the city, you should be able to go to any department and file a report. I understand there might be reasons why it would be easier to file in the district that you're in, but it shouldn't. You're in Boston. Any district you go to for an issue with the police department should be able to be addressed here.
John, it's a great question. Let's have the mayor's response.
I completely agree with you. That is incredibly important for safety issues, and we need to. We've made a lot of changes over the years in terms of domestic violence filing and language barriers and who is, how our officers are trained in terms of communications with various parties who are involved. And so this is one that I need to learn more of, whether it is a policy that has to happen or if this was just in this particular instance, the people who were there happened to send you in that direction. So if you are able to stay on and just give us a little more information on which station, that would be very helpful. And we'll look into the overall issue to make sure that people can feel as safe as possible.
So, John, if you're willing, please stay on the line and we'll get your contact information for the mayor. Thank you.
Mayor, we've got a couple of texts about this, probably because we had Bruce Marks on, who's from NACA and ACA. That's the first home buyer program that enables people with using different criteria, not necessarily the credit scores and stuff, to get houses. He doesn't work in Boston. The person is asking why is the city not working with them? Because they do seem to have a pretty successful program for people who might not qualify elsewhere for homes.
They're also building homes now, he told us, in Newark and Lima,
yeah.
Ohio.
And I think they're based in Roxbury, aren't they?
JP.
Isn't it JP or Roxbury? Okay, JP.
Yeah, I've been to their offices. They're beautiful. Bruce, of course, is a staple of the local scene here and community, and is well known by the folks in our administration. I know he is in, our chief of housing is in regular communication, and so we're well aware of the offerings and all that they do on their partner side. The city also has its own programs to think about down payment assistance, mortgages, and we're really standing up our efforts there, and many of them are kind of directly on the city side.
Mayor, I don't want this to be a loaded question, but I can't. What do you think of the nauseating performance by Donald Trump the other night on CNN?
I didn't even watch. I mean, I saw some of the clips afterward. I can't understand the calculus to. It's like, haven't we learned enough by this point to somehow think that this would go differently this one time, and that it wouldn't just be a platform for more lies, more disinformation, misinformation, and hopefully it was illuminating and a reminder of something that we had maybe gotten a little bit more distance from, but unfortunately I think any exposure for, it just drags us right back to the same conspiracies and real harm that this country experienced and continues to pick up the pieces from.
Did you choose not to watch, or you were busy?
I was busy anyway, but I wouldn't have watched.
Wouldn't have. Eliza, I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask, there's been a lot of criticism of the age of President Biden if he runs again. What do you think about those criticisms?
He's doing the job. I think there's, in terms of our interactions with the federal government, we have never, I've only been in this job a little bit, but from what I hear from other city officials, it's been, we're receiving grants that we had never ever before known about or hadn't existed as a funding source. We are getting direct technical assistance and expertise. We're constantly learning best practices and having federal officials visit Boston to take what we're doing and share it elsewhere as well. So we've enjoyed a very productive, very fruitful relationship with the administration, and they're really focused on cities, on making sure funding gets to states, but also that cities are getting direct support, and that has made a big difference with the team that he's assembled.
So clearly you support his reelection.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Eliza and JP, you're on with the mayor.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Hi, Mayor Wu, and thanks for taking my call, Jim and Marjorie.
Sure.
I'm calling because I'm excited about participatory budgeting coming to Boston as a citywide process this year. We've had youth participatory budgeting since 2014, and I've been working with a coalition of 38 community groups from across the city who are super excited. We've been doing these workshops with residents who have so many ideas and are really excited to be able to engage in the budget process in a more direct, democratic way, because as a resident who's engaged on my own time for many, many years, it's confusing and hard. And so my question, Mayor Wu, is the funding for the Office of Participatory Budgeting, which includes the staff and money to run the process and projects, is at $2 million, which is really not enough, in our opinion, to allow residents to suggest projects for the city and fund them. Will you increase funding for participatory budgeting in your final budget so they have more money to work with, so residents have more money to work with directly?
Could you also explain briefly what it is for those who don't know, please, Mayor?
Sure.
No, I meant the mayor.
Sorry.
Eliza, we appreciate your
probably
question.
Be the expert anyway.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you for all that you're doing and for continuing to be part of this. The idea is that the city's revenues that we spend come from taxpayer dollars, come from different sources that, whether it's parking meters or tickets that are given out, property taxes, and those dollars are allocated to all the programs that we have. The buildings like libraries and community centers, our police, fire, EMS, teachers, schools, trash pickup. And so we want to make sure that the dollars that are being collected from our residents to do the work of residents really does reflect the will of the people. And one way to inject some democracy directly into that is by setting aside some funding where residents can actually propose uses for that funding directly, help give feedback on how they would prioritize and rank them to really more directly, usually it's on a smaller scale, but shape projects that are happening in neighborhoods or give feedback on overall. So we have our standard budget process running where we're in the middle of hearings with the City Council on all the allocations across departments, and we, according to the ballot initiative and changes that were made, are standing up a participatory budgeting program. We have, I believe, I don't know if the offer just went out or is it officially finalized, but we are bringing on our director of the participatory budgeting office very, very soon. Very excited about that staffing up of the office, and then we'll be able to really get it stood up. But when we are launching new initiatives in the city, it's important to get it right and have the grounding there. And so, there's still, I can't predict exactly what will happen in the budget process this year between all the rounds with the City Council and our final product. But we did put forward a budget, including that initial funding to get the office started so that we could be on track to continue to launch it in a way that makes sense as this program will evolve in future years.
Thank you, Eliza.
Remember at the start of the show, in honor of Mother's Day, we talked to a lot of mothers about the state of motherhood in 2023. We got some very happy and some very upsetting answers. But I'm wondering, since it is Mother's Day Sunday, do your two little boys give you pancakes in bed, or did you get to take the day off, or do you know what is going to happen? Are you going to be surprised?
I think it may be a little too early for breakfast, but probably the first thing we'll do is to go to the Mother's Day Walk for Peace.
Yep.
So we'll be there with community and really ensuring that everyone is rallying around safety, healing, and justice and love, starting in Dorchester. There's also the Duckling Day Parade.
I did not know about that.
Everybody comes, decked out in their duckling gear. At some point, I hope I get served something in bed.
Okay.
Kids, maybe it'll be like a snack or something. But they get really excited about handmade car. They'll draw their little pictures and things like that.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to it.
What do people wear in the Duckling Day Parade? They wear like duck outfits?
I was actually gifted a gorgeous hat. Someone had, it was a yellow hat, and they had gotten googly eyes and hot glue gunned it on and some feathers. And so people really, the kids come in little duckling costumes and go around the garden.
Can I do that? Since you mentioned it, it's really important. One of the most amazing events, Clementina Cherry, obviously in honor of her son, Lucy Brown, who was murdered many years ago. This is Sunday morning. What a way to start Mother's Day. The gathering is at 8 a.m. at Townfield Park in Dorchester. You can go to Mother's Day Walk 4, the number 4peace.org, and get information. And it is one of the most impressive gatherings of people that I have ever, Marjorie's been there too, have ever encountered. So it's great you're going to be there, and I hope other people are
Our
too.
community in Boston, there's nothing like a mother's love, and for the mothers who have gone through the unthinkable to really build community and ensure that we are changing the lives of families to come. It's an incredibly powerful and important place to be.
And by the way, they celebrate the lives at this event of those whom they lost. So for those who are saying, what a depressing way to start the day, it's important and uplifting in a lot of ways. It's really a very moving time. Mayor, thanks for the plants. It's wonderful to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very, very much. Have a happy Mother's Day, Mayor Wu.